Hi, I'm Tyler, and this is the Fox Valley Film Critics. In this special episode, we're going to be discussing the Dark Knight trilogy and its 10th anniversary of the Dark Knight itself. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the show, brought to you by Groupthink Productions and FVTV. Joining us once again is the wonderful and illustrious Tom.
Hello.
How's it going, buddy?
It's going. It's going.
So I wanted to have you on specifically because we have a storied history in the subject of Batman.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
we do.
As of this month, The Dark Knight is officially a decade old. It came out July 18th, 2008, and it is now July of 2018. And I wanted to kind of talk about the history of Nolan a little bit, your history with him. You said you liked a lot of his movies. I wanted to go into each of the individual films and kind of talk about the legacy of the film, how it's affected other superhero movies, and where we're at, like, cinematically with this. So you said, or tell us a little about your thoughts now that 10 years have passed on this.
Man, it's been 10 years. That's a big thing. Yeah, The Dark Knight was a kind of a big movie for me. Number one, the opening sequence of The Dark Knight, it ranks in my top 3 greatest opening sequences for any movie ever. Absolutely amazing. And it was one of the first movies I saw after I graduated high school. I went and saw it with a couple of my friends, and it came out just less than 2 months after I graduated high school, and it was absolutely mind-blowing. During that summer I really got to dive into watching movies more. I didn't have that kind of freedom when I was in school, and this movie really helped cement me into really studying film a lot more, because it was that good. I'm a huge Batman fan, always have been, and Batman Begins was pretty good, but it didn't really bring me into the character of Batman really being the visceral character of Batman that he is, that you see in The Dark Knight. And this really, really helped cement Batman as being basically the stepping point for every other superhero from that point on. No one was really taking the dark approach with superheroes, and he basically, it really started with Batman Begins taking the dark approach, but really cementing in with The Dark Knight, and then again in The Dark Knight Rises, really changed the game for superhero movies entirely.
Sure. I didn't see it initially when it came out, because at that point, I think the only Batman movie I'd seen was the original '89 Batman movie, and I would have been like 13 when it came out, so I'd have just been old enough to see it. But I hadn't been paying attention to the movies then. I wasn't a big movie guy, so what I remember mostly about that time was the spectacle of Batman being a thing. I don't remember the movie itself. I remember movies. I remember hearing about movie theaters selling out. I remember.
Yeah.
The 7-Eleven cups and all the promotional material and the Dark Knight ride at at Six Flags Great America.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the culture around it more than the movie itself. I don't think I watched it till maybe 2010, 2011, a couple of years after it passed. Probably about the time Inception came out, because I think within Nolan's filmography, I think this represents the movie that kind of crystallized people's kind of understanding Nolan as a director and liking Nolan, because I a couple of years ago I do my yearly director marathons, and I did Nolan very early in that cycle of going through directors, and I watched everything from his first indie film Following all the way up to I think Inception was the newest one at that point.
Really?
it would have been 2 or 3 years ago. So it was probably Inception, or not Inception, Interstellar.
Yeah, Interstellar.
And I think this movie kind of set what people think Nolan is as a director, and I think it's a weird way to think about him as a director, because I think early Nolan is very. I know I'm rambling a lot, so forgive me. I know early Nolan is very crime movie focused, very noir focused. Like you think of Memento or Prestige, they're smaller movies based on character.
Right.
And after that, his films started turning into epics, like old school epics. And you see Interstellar, it's just mind blowing visuals, and you think Dunkirk, giant war movie, Interstellar, giant space movie, and I think it cemented a lot of people what people think Nolan is.
Yeah.
In a lot of weird ways, which is kind of fascinating,
but in a weird way, Nolan's always been the same kind of director. When you think back from between like following Memento and The Prestige, and Inception, and you see, how he's built the story. You can apply that same thing to his entire Batman trilogy, the Dark Knight trilogy. That same tone is in those movies.
Yeah, but they're grittier and smaller, reserved movies compared to the movies that he made once people started expecting him to be big idea guy. So.
Right, and the thing with that was, I mean, he partnered with Syncope Films for a long time, which was, Syncope is it's brain related science, but basically he's, in my eyes, he's always been the same director, and it's not like all of his movies are the exact same movie.
No.
But they very much carry a very Christopher Nolan tone through them. And you can tell a Christopher Nolan movie when you watch one.
Yes.
If you pay attention.
His voice always comes through when he's making these movies. That's the important thing.
Right.
So yeah, I think this. I don't know if I would say this is his best movie, because there's maybe 3 or 4 movies that I would say kind of fit in his high echelon of his best movies, but this is certainly.
I would agree. I wouldn't say it's his best movie.
You were saying Prestige earlier, right?
The Prestige is I would probably say is his best movie ever. It is an amazing movie. For a long time there was this kind of stigma in Hollywood to have some sort of twist ending, and M. Night Shyamalan just kind of ran that for a long time. That became his thing, became a running joke, with him. And Christopher Nolan in The Prestige just kind of put up a giant middle finger to him, like, "No, I can do this too. I can do it 7 times," and it's a really good movie. That being said, I know a lot of people really love Interstellar. And a lot of people really love Inception, and they think those are amazing movies, and have, especially Inception has a huge following that really dives into kind of the lore of that movie, and huge like couple year-long discussions upon what's going on in that movie. To this day, people are still trying to figure some of it out. But to me, it's The Prestige. It is The Prestige, his Prestige film. It's such a good movie.
I would say for me, the ranking is top echelon is Prestige, Dark Knight, Inception, and then from there you can kind of argue about Memento, Dunkirk, Interstellar, and then everything else is slightly below that.
But. Yeah, for me, I mean, my top 3 are definitely The Prestige, Dunkirk, and Dark Knight.
Okay. Dunkirk's arguable because that movie doesn't have any sort of shared consensus, but it's good. I like it, but it was
my favorite movie of last year.
I will give that to you. I'm just saying it's controversial, but you're a man.
The Siege of Dunkirk was controversial.
Controversy.
The Siege of Dunkirk itself was controversial. I mean, you did a great job.
All right, that's fair. So let's kind of go into the trilogy itself. So you said did you see Batman Begins when it first came out?
I did.
Okay. I mean, it's weird now thinking about it, because now I only can think about it in context of the trilogy. But there was a what 3-4 year span where this was just a singular movie by itself.
Yeah. It came out
2000,
2004, 2005,
2004, 2005-ish.
2005. And it was just another Batman movie. Before that, the only thing we had to really look around at were Batnips and the '89 Batman, which controversially I'm not a huge fan of.
That's fine.
It is a great movie. It's just not. It's not my style.
It's not really holding up over time. People like it, but it's not getting. People aren't keeping. The respect isn't really staying for it.
Yeah, and what we had to look forward to in Batman films were that was a standard that was set, and what we got beyond that was Batman and Robin and Batman Forever, and we're like, okay, maybe Batman shouldn't be in movies anymore. And then Christopher Nolan, took the mantle up, and Batman Begins came out, and it was a standalone film, and it was absolutely amazing. It was an origin story entirely. For a couple of years that's what it was. And being a huge fan of Batman, like I am, I had to go and see it in theaters. Every single one of the Dark Knight trilogies I saw in theaters at least 4 times, and it blew my mind away. It was far more than what we ever could have expected out of a Batman movie. With what had transpired before, did a super good job.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I first kind of started getting into the trilogy. My first the first time I watched it, I didn't remember very much after it, because I watched it and Dark Knight in just like one afternoon when I first watched it. Okay. And then, yeah, it's quite a pairing. And I remember going after that, I went through this weird period where I would watch Batman Begins from time to time and be like, this is amazing. Why did I not remember how good this was? And then I'd forget about it. And then I'd watch it again and be like, this is amazing. How did I not remember this? And I would do this. I would just do this over and over again, where I would just keep forgetting everything that happened in it. And it's such a weird movie. I mean, there's so many great performances, and there's so many, like, the tone is so good that there's the idea of how a character like Batman could exist in a gritty real world.
Yeah.
Is there, even though the movie does play around with it to the point where there's that great scene where Liam Neeson is like, you took my ideas about theatricality really literally.
Yeah. Which, I mean, Liam Neeson did a good job in that movie. Cillian Murphy did a good job in that movie. A really good job. It was actually one of the first performances I had seen of his. Although I do remember having seen him before. I'm like, oh, that's that guy. And I was like, okay. And of course he makes a return in The Dark Knight Rises as the judge.
He shows up in The Dark Knight briefly too, which is
very briefly, yeah.
Super weird. Like he, of all the villains to have continuously in all 3 movies, Scarecrow gets a continuous role, a small villain role in the first movie, even though he's technically the main, one of the main villains, but his screen time is relatively limited.
Right.
And he keeps showing up in like limited roles in the sequels. I'm like, that's so weird. But
the weird thing with that was, not really off topic, but the Batman animated series did a fantastic job with that. It made Scarecrow one of my favorite villains. Just his design was awesome, and when I saw it brought to life in Batman Begins, it just blew my mind.
That's all the time for this segment. Join us for the following segment, where we'll talk about The Dark Knight itself, as well as the legacy of these movies. Stay tuned.
Hello? Great news. I found us an audition.
Morning, Gloria.
Wait, you got what?
I found us a posting for an audition for this really cool sounding indie drama being made by this eccentric outsider artistic type.
You did? Where'd you find it?
Craigslist? Look, it'll be fine. I've done gigs like this before. We shoot a few weeks, you'll get a shot at a big role to show off to the casting guys, and I'll get the cash I need to stay in town for another month, okay?
Hello, welcome back to the show. So, we are at The Dark Knight, which is obviously the subject of this, because now it's a decade old as of this month. Mm-hmm. So, I just rewatched the film past couple nights, and the thing that surprised me about watching it now is everyone talks about this movie as being dark and gritty, and what the thing that it kind of got to me was there's a lot of levity in this movie. There's a lot of really, really funny lines in this movie.
There are.
Where it's a movie, like everyone complains about that nowadays, where you have movies like The Avengers or Guardians of the Galaxy, where they'll undercut dramatic moments with jokes, and this movie does that constantly. There's that scene where the Joker is driving the truck, and he's just like, "I like this job. I like it."
Yeah.
There's so many great moments like that, and I think that's often lost in the discussion of this movie. Is just this movie, it's dark, and there's moments of gore, like the pencil to the eye thing.
I wouldn't say that's very gory. You don't really
implied
see too much.
Gore.
I think the more implied gore is the
face.
The guy's name's Brian. The guy who gets captured by the Joker for trying to be Batman and gets tortured and then hung.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of gore. Like there's also the tryout scene.
Yeah,
where it's implied that a man
which is also a very funny scene.
Yeah, well, it's funny up until you know what happens after the scene, but
yeah. I mean, I guess to me that's still funny at that point because it very much falls in line with a very chaotic Joker. It's like, okay, go.
One of you gets to get stabbed.
Only one of you is going to be here, so
pull cue.
whoever's a survivor, you're going to stay. It's a little bit funny to me because I mean that's very much in his character. It's the movie has very very dark moments, very dramatic moments, but also very funny moments. When Joker's walking through the ball that they have, he goes up and he just grabs that guy's face. Like, you know where Harvey Dent is, and just shakes the guy's head for him. Like, to me, I always laugh at that. It's always funny to me. It's like, he knows he doesn't know where he is, so he just shakes his head for him because the guy's in fear. He's not going to do anything. And then probably to me the funniest moment of that movie is when the Joker appears to Harvey Dent in the hospital and just says sorry. Just that face it's funny to me. Just, sorry. My bad. Like, ruined your life. My bad.
But yeah, this movie is depending on who you ask, is either the best or one of the best superhero movies of all time. I don't know how I would rank it because there are a couple movies that I would say are come close to the level or sit at that level. But what makes this movie so important is clearly that it really hit that. I don't know if what the right word is. Maybe like that rare moment of filmmaking where everything works perfectly.
Yeah.
And it transcends just being a good movie to being something deeper, something about something. There's a lot of meditation on.
It definitely did. Like we were saying earlier that like there was just only these one standalone movies going up to it, and they were pretty good to okay, and then I'm one of those people that would say this is the best superhero movie ever made, and I firmly believe that, and it's because it is one of those that everything worked so perfectly. Are there a couple plot holes at the very end of the movie? Yeah, there's a couple, but every single one of those is like, well, why didn't the Joker do this? I'm like, well, he literally says, do I look like a guy with a plan? It's like, There's a plot hole because he didn't even think about it. He just does what he does, which is another way that the movie just works perfectly. It can have plot holes like that, and they still make sense.
Well, the plot holes are incidental because the movie is all about the ideas of the characters, and
Right.
it's about the corruption of good in the face of like ultimate evil. It's about
Yeah.
order and chaos. It's about there's a lot of contemporary metaphors about the Patriot Act and how far you're willing to compromise your values in the face of Armageddon, essentially.
Yeah.
And it comes to it. It really gets to the point where it does what any great film can do, which is use the basis of the surfaces of everything that's happening in the movie, the textures, the characters, and it finds deeper meaning in that to the point and expresses it. And I think that's part of that's something that only a few superhero movies have done. Like, I love the genre. I will unapologetically defend it, but most of the movies that come out, they're just very good. Like, every once in a while, you get one that's fun, and you get. And I don't want to just dismiss them all as popcorn movies because I think that's a little demeaning. But
that's what a lot of them are, though.
I don't like the term. It makes it sound like it's just something disposable or useless. And I think that something like the Avengers, it's doing a completely different thing. There's no deeper thematic depth to it, but it's just fun, and it's really good at that.
Yeah.
But it really cuts to the core of like something difficult and thematically then necessary, which is something that you have to do to be a great film and be above that.
I would say ironically for me, like the next superhero movie that kind of challenges The Dark Knight for being real, and in the way that The Dark Knight is real. It's not just a like a popcorn movie. It's not one that's just there to make a studio money. Would have been like Captain America: Civil War.
Winter Soldier or Civil War?
Civil War.
Okay, interesting.
Tied, bringing in with Winter Soldier, but Civil War really puts it at a point where how far are you willing to go for your morals? Like, at what point do you let someone else's beliefs control you? And that both of these movies very, very much do that. I personally believe that The Dark Knight does it a little bit better.
I would say that The Dark Knight does it significantly better. It's more cohesive. It holds together better as a whole.
Right. And it really is, this. It's a titan of a movie. In the way it expresses itself. Again, you can't deny the themes in the movie and like how well they are done. Which is again why it's just to me the best superhero movie of all time.
Let's move on to the sequel because I don't want to spend too much time on The Dark Knight.
Right.
Where do you sit on this? Because the Dark Knight Rises is a movie that tends to get a little bit controversial.
Yeah. I personally love the movie.
Same.
It was done really well. For a while, it was like after it first came out, for the first like week or two, it was one of the best movies ever. And then something happened, and in the preceding couple months, people started getting on the other side of the fence of it. Like, I don't know if I like this too much. It didn't do this too much. A lot of people thought that it wasn't all that well put together. There was problems between its its own storytelling, how it kept shifting, what the truth was. And personally, I loved the movie.
I will note this movie does play into kind of our origin story as friends, just because it was the first Dark Knight movie I saw in theaters, but we were both the same church group at the time, and we both ended up seeing it at the same time. Yep. So that was fun.
I mean, I'd already seen it by that time.
Well, yeah.
But like I said earlier, I saw all of them in theaters at least 4 times. I saw this one 6 times in theaters.
Wow.
And a lot of it was really good. I really liked it. But then there were just like a lot of groups of people that wanted to see it that I was a part of, so I ended up seeing it repeatedly.
I will say, if I had to summarize any specific problem, I think more than anything it has to do with the death of Heath Ledger, which we haven't talked about yet. But that obviously, I think, because obviously the original pitch for Dark Knight Rises was going to be Heath Ledger and Bane
Right.
working together, and you can kind of see the roots of that in the film. It's that this was going to be a film where the Joker finally gets to watch his morals play out on on Gotham City itself,
Right.
and then the actor died tragically, and obviously that hurt Christopher Nolan badly. He didn't want to make the third one, but Warner Brothers just said, "We'll let you make any movie you want, as long as you make us our third Dark Knight movie."
Yeah.
And they let him make Inception, and then he came back for Dark Knight Rises. His heart clearly wasn't entirely there, so they probably rushed it a little bit. But I think the Bane stuff works really well, obviously.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does work really well, and you can definitely see again the building blocks of this being a Joker and Bane movie, which honestly I'm sure every one of us would have loved to have seen. It would have been absolutely fantastic. And instead of that, he had to come up with a new concept, and it took him a while to do it because basically one of his key components was gone. And it wasn't like he could do any sort of negotiating to bring it back. It was gone. And I think with what he had left to work with, he did a great job.
Yeah, and you can definitely see that the themes still are there, because there's a lot of then contemporary satirization of stuff like Occupy Wall Street. And
Right.
there's a lot of relevant themes that are obviously kind of jumping off of where The Dark Knight left. But overall, weaker, but I would really like it. I know there's a lot of people I've met who say it's the worst third film in a franchise ever, and I'm like, no, it's not. They put so much into this that they really tried. They really, really tried, and they put a lot of money into it. But beyond that, I want to talk about kind of the legacy of the Dark Knight trilogy. And where do you think that the trilogy has left Hollywood? Because I think that it's clear that, like everything Hollywood does, they take the superficial elements of it, the texture or the dark ideas or some plot twist from The Dark Knight, or any movie that's successful, and they apply it to movies in the worst way possible. So you see bad stuff in Amazing Spider-Man or Fan Four Stick or even Skyfall of all movies that directly aped elements of Dark Knight. So where do you think Hollywood is after The Dark Knight?
It's kind of in a weird place. One of the things I've been, I guess, as you know, very well known for is I am a DC fan to the core, and I'm like, I give Marvel credit for what they do, but not a lot. And a lot of that stems off of my belief that the success of those movies really came from the success of the Dark Knight trilogy. It birthed superhero movies back into existence. It really gave them their own foothold and their own market again. And Marvel kind of took that, and they kept taking the dark tones that the Dark Knight trilogy really set, and created an incredibly fantastic universe, cinematic universe. And to me, that universe has gone into hundreds of other movies, and to me it all stemmed from the success of the Dark Knight.
I would disagree with you a little on the MCU, because I think they went in their own direction with that. But I think the real point where you see the rubber hit the road is with the DCEU and how much they've both strived to ape and avoid being the same thing. But I think that at the end of the day, I think that you're right. It's definitely gave the superhero genre a foothold, but people took the elements and did bad movies with those elements to the point where. But that's all the time we have for the discussion. Obviously, we both love the movies, and if you haven't checked them out at this point, you definitely should. They're 10 years old. I'm sure there's going to be a couple theaters doing throwback screenings, so if you get the chance, definitely do it. That's all. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the show. You can find past recordings of the show at the Gripthing Productions YouTube page. You can follow me on Twitter at @AntisocialCritI. That's critic without the C at the end. And you can find more of my written reviews at the Geeks Under Grace and the antisocialcritic.tumblr.com. I'm Tyler with the Fox Valley Film Critics. Have a wonderful day.